I tell the recruiter exactly what I'm looking for, and I want the recruiter to communicate that to the candidate.
All these techniques will help them get an interview call. Assuming at this point now they have an interview call. Now the second battle starts, which is cracking and getting that offer.
What are you really trying to get out of this? You don't have to go straight for the throat with the very first question of, do you have a job for me?
Has it ever happened that you make a decision already at that point of time that I definitely want to hire this person, but I still want them to go through the process?
I've seen in my own experience that analytical ability is the hardest thing to teach a PM. I mean, in an interview, I never bring it up, any sort of educational background. I never talk about it. And because I don't look at your resume, I don't even know. It is a hard question, but now you've made the hiring manager think.
When you were looking for Indeed, what kind of preparation did you do? And now with all the research tools that are available, like how do you prepare for these roles?
As a job seeker, shoot your shot. Keep trying. It's going to happen, I promise you.
Before we dive into all the strategies and stories that we're going to discuss in this podcast, let me ask you this. Do you have a clear job hunting strategy to get an internship or a full-time job? Most people don't, and it's costing them opportunities. I've helped over 1,100 students with their strategies through my ultimate job hunting course.
And trust me, I'm not even kidding. I could see so many recruiters viewing my profile.
And it's been the best investment I've ever made.
The content is incredibly practical, filled with tips and strategies that make you stand out to recruiters.
It was one of the best courses that I have done till date.
This course covers everything that you need to stand out. You will get ultimate resume course, you will get ultimate LinkedIn course, networking strategy, access to 1,100 plus job seekers for support, and personal support from me through WhatsApp group. I will walk you through every single step that you need with real examples and the tools that will give you an edge. I don't want you to miss any other opportunity to land your next job or an internship. So check the link in the description. And now I will let you enjoy the podcast. All right. This is part two, John. And for maybe people who haven't watched part one, if you can do like a quick intro, who are you and what do you do? Yeah.
Thanks for having me, Yudi. It's good to see you again.
Yes.
My name is John McMahon. I'm a director of product at Indeed. I work on the interviews portion of the products at Indeed. I've been at Indeed for 6.5 years now, and I've been in product for a little over 10 overall.
Nice. Love it. And again, for people who haven't watched the first part, they're missing out. So they should go and watch it. It is, I have another course community and I gave them uncut version of this. So they loved it and they're like, when is the second part coming? I was like, coming, it's very coming soon. So they are all excited. Okay. So I know we stopped last time at the networking side where we at this point they have either been able to like get through the recruiters has made decision, or now they are like starting to find hiring manager through their stalking skills, and it's now much easier. And it's like, okay, I found it. Now they're starting to send these emails. There's other side of networking, which is in-person networking or meeting people through conferences, hackathons. What is your view? Because I, again, giving you a perspective of my users or my audience, sorry, I think of users all the time. So it's my audience who are international students, and for them going to conference sometimes might be expensive, like, so they always ask like, is it worth it? Do I spend $300 on this ticket? Like, will I get anything out of it? What's your point of view in terms of like, should people go to these product conferences or hackathons to build network? Essentially the goal is to get an interview call, but this is a stepping stone for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned the goal.
Yes.
That was going to be my first question. What is your goal of
Yeah.
wanting to go do these things?
Mm.
So if the goal is to get a job, I guess at the end of the day, you're trying to get a job.
Yep.
It's a lot easier to connect with people in person. Like, I won't beat around the bush there.
Yeah.
It's like when people send me LinkedIn invites and I've never met you, it's very unlikely I'm going to accept your invitation and talk to you because I just don't know who you are.
Yep.
But if we've had, a 2-minute conversation somewhere, then I know your face. I know what problem you're trying to solve. We probably talked about whatever thing it was that interested you that caused you to come up and start the conversation. So yeah, I'm willing to continue that conversation more
Mm,
likely than like the cold start. That's really hard.
yeah.
So overcoming that hump in person is much easier than through a cold email or cold LinkedIn outreach. Now,
Mm.
should you go spend hundreds of dollars to go do that? Probably not, honestly. Like there
Interesting.
are usually
Yeah.
a lot of local things.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you dig in, you could find a lot of local things that are probably free.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily conferences. They're typically more interactive. Like I live in Austin, and
Yeah.
there are all kinds of product things that are just happening around
Mm.
town.
Mm.
And you can go out, one night a week and go, to this. There might be like a mini workshop, might be a little dinner, might be a presentation somebody's giving. Like those are all opportunities.
Yeah.
Or you could start your own.
Yeah.
That's also an interesting story.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And when you, so one, I know there are like conferences like Society of Women Engineers or Grace Hopper. These are a lot of time, these are recruiting events as well, because there are hiring happening. But um, we met at the Purdue Product Conference. It was organized by students, and that's where we met. And but I still think the students are very hesitant. It's available to them, and somehow they think it's not going to work out, so why try? And I just want to, again, I am a true believer, as you are as well, that meeting in person is going to give them a lot more edge
Mhm.
than trying to do cold outreach. But I think there's if it hasn't worked out in the past, they already set a mindset that it's never going to work out, so I'm like, it's not going to worth my time. I want to bring the point home that it is going to work out. You just have to figure out how to make that conversation, or like, obviously, if it will be very clear if you just start and it's like, hey John, do you have any opportunity in your team? That's not gonna go well. But what, like, again, would you agree that going to such college, because a lot of universities do things like that, like Purdue did it, so I know many other universities also bring industry speakers where they get chance to talk to the students. um, would you agree to going to such events and building a relationship with the speakers?
Yeah, I would say, look, if it was easy, everybody would do it. I know it's hard.
Yeah.
So try, give it a
Mm,
shot. And that's really part of being a product manager. You're going to fail a lot as a product manager.
yeah.
So you need to recognize, yes, I'm going to fail. That's okay. But I am going to learn something. And the next time I attempt it, I will have absorbed those learnings into my attempt. And every time I do it, it's going to be a little bit better
Mm,
because everything's a product. We talked about this last time. So even
yes.
if like you're trying to get a job, that's a problem you're trying to solve.
Mm,
And you're taking these iterative steps toward getting that job. And just every time you fail, make sure you've learned something from that failure and incorporate that into your
mm,
next attempt.
okay. Hey, before we move on to the next part of the video, I want to quickly talk about our newsletter community, which you can be part of absolutely free. We are now going strong and we have more than 40,000 people in our newsletter community. So imagine 40,000 people are receiving my newsletter every single week, twice a week, where I break down all of the stories that we did and make it a valuable resource for you. So if you're someone who doesn't have time to watch this and you just want to get an email with all of the resources into an email, that is the place to be. I'll put the link in the description. I'll give you some example. This is the one for Tanvi, where how she got 2 co-ops and she paid off her entire master's fees. This is an example of Maya, where she got 3 co-ops and she paid off her fees plus a little bit of savings. Here is an example of Sahil, who got his green card in 3 years. Here is an example where we shared bunch of resources on job hunting. So I promise this is going to be valuable resource for you, and it doesn't cost you anything. If you want to be part of our newsletter community, link will be in the description, or you can go to link.udj.com/newsletter. This is the URL. And now I'll let you enjoy the video. I want to speak for introverts. Are you introvert or extrovert? I feel like you're an introvert.
I definitely have both. Like I
Introvert.
know how to be extroverted.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think at my core I am introverted. Like
Yeah.
if I have meetings all day and I'm talking all day, I'm exhausted at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Same.
Like, I
Yeah.
think that's one of the telltale signs of an introvert.
Yes.
If
Yep.
you're talking all day, you're just totally drained
Yeah.
by the day's end.
Yes, same, same. But uh, I'm also introvert, and I get people suck the energy out of me. They don't give me energy. Doesn't mean like I mean like if I have meetings and I'm in the conference, then when I'm home, I just don't want to talk. Like I just like give
Yeah.
me some time to like recharge myself.
Mhm.
So, but there are a lot of introverts. So for extroverts, I feel sometimes it's much easier to make a conversation. They know how to like start this conversation, but for introverts sometimes they don't. They are like they think too much in their brain before the conversation has already happened in their brain, and then they start the conversation. So how, like, what should be an ideal approach? Like, let's say we are again at Purdue, we are doing this talk together, students see you, they have heard you. What should be an ideal approach that can potentially lead into a good connection and then lead into maybe them saying like, hey, I see there's a your team is hiring, or you might bring up like, I might have something. How to ease into that conversation?
That's a skill. It really is. Like it starts with small talk. Like
Yes,
that small talk is a skill.
it
So I
is.
would say like it's okay to be very innocuous and non-threatening at the start. Like, hey, how you doing? My name is so and so. I came in from XYZ town, to come attend this place. I'm like, oh, I know that place, or really, that seems really far away. What's the weather like over there? Just kind of like
Yeah.
starting really slow and easy, and then you'll just really find that organically you'll work your way toward like, oh, what brought you to the conference today, or what interests you in some of the topics that we're going to talk about,
Mm.
and then you'll start to bridge that gap of, what are you really trying to get out of this.
Mm.
You don't
Mm.
have to go straight for the throat with the very first question of, do you have a job for me?
Yes. Yeah. 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 And let's say the first conversation and that whole conversation happened, and I had a great conversation with you. I got connected with you on LinkedIn. Now the follow up, can I? Is it okay to ask for like, hey John, like it was great connecting with you at Purdue. I love talking about what you're doing at Indeed, about this video interview, eliminating resume, etc. Something. I'm just coming up with some
Mhm.
topic, and it's like I'm super interested to talk about this, and would love to do like a 15-minute virtual chat if you have any. Uh, is that okay? Like I think again, I'm bringing this resistance, and a lot of international students feel like it's not okay to do this. So I want to know, like, how would you react if people did that to you?
Yeah, one of the things, another thing we talked about last time too, is that the job seeker is the most important thing.
Mm,
And the worst thing that can happen is the person you ask says no
yeah.
or never talks to you again. So what? Like you didn't know them yesterday anyway. So your
That is
life hasn't
true.
changed at all.
Yes.
But there is that small chance that it does work out.
Mm,
And just because you did try, you're getting closer to that result that you wanted. I think what you did really well at Purdue was you started to set those expectations ahead of time.
mm.
So we had our conversation
Yep.
and it organically went into like, oh, you mentioned you did podcasting, you had this audience, etc. And then you mentioned you thought it'd be interesting if we met up after this and just had a couple convos
Yep.
about interesting topics. And I was like, yeah, okay, I think that sounds cool.
Yeah.
And then, a week or whatever later, you followed up, and then we found a time and a date, and things just kind of
Yeah.
slowly snowballed. But it was never like trying to cold start over and over again.
Yes. Yeah. 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 It wasn't the first conversation like, hey, you are product director. I think my audience will love to learn from you. Can we do a podcast? Yeah. It wasn't like that. Yes. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's assume I'm moving from now getting an interview call, because all these techniques will help them get an interview call. Assuming at this point now they have an interview call. Now the second battle starts, which is cracking and getting that offer, which is, I don't know which one is harder. I feel like getting an interview call is harder. What do you think? Like, which one is harder? I feel like getting an interview call is much harder than cracking one.
Getting an interview, that's got to be less than 1%, right? Like if you
Yeah.
think about all the attempts you make at applications and sending messages, your hit rate has got to be so low, it's less than 1% overall.
Yeah.
Once you have the interview, your chances of succeeding have got to be higher than 1%. I hope so, at least.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So now it's like the first thing, obviously I'm not talking about the screening round, assuming that's like, simple enough and
Mhm.
they don't say something super crazy that they get rejected. But this is the time when they are either meeting with a hiring manager, and at least in our case, it's the first time is like with the hiring manager. W- uh, what is it that you as a hiring manager look at, and what are the things that would be like, that's impressive? And has it ever happened that you make a decision already at that point of time that I definitely want to hire this person, but I still want them to go through the process?
Everybody goes through the process. I guess
Yeah.
I'll start there.
Yeah.
Nobody gets to skip the line through any part. At least at like a big established company,
Mm.
there's a very well-defined process, and everybody goes through it,
Yeah.
regardless of if you were a superstar, in your first interview or two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Me personally, I've come away from some hiring manager screens impressed.
Mm.
Like, oh, I'm looking forward to how this person performs in the panel interview.
Mm. Mm.
If I'm already discouraged, then I'm not even going to continue on because it just gets harder
Yeah.
after the hiring manager screen.
Yeah.
So I want to at least be feeling semi optimistic that like I didn't have enough time to really dig into everything. I think they might actually be good in the panel interview and some of these follow up one on ones.
Mm.
I want to be in that spot where I don't want to waste like an hour of five people's time on the panel.
Mm. Yeah.
For me personally, I tell a recruiter exactly what I'm looking for, and I
Mm.
want the recruiter to communicate that to the candidate.
Oh,
I'm not
interesting.
gonna like I'm not
Yeah.
gonna give them questions and answers,
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
gonna give them the exact test or anything like that.
Right. Yeah.
But the characteristics that I'm looking for are biased toward analytical ability. And this
Mm.
is just, again, my data point speaking here. I've seen in my own experience that analytical ability is the hardest thing to teach a PM.
Mm.
If they already have strong signs of that ability, then that's great. I think the other aspects are easier to teach,
Yeah. Mm.
minus some potential personality defects like being a jerk in the interview or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
if there are red flags, I'm like, thanks for your time.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say analytical abilities, what do you mean? Like, is it making decision based on data?
So, when I ask you a question like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? How are you going to know when that problem is solved? Like,
Mm.
that is an analytical question to me. I want you to tell me something measurable that you will look at to know if you have succeeded or not.
Mm.
And if
Yeah.
you're not using something measurable, then how do you know the problem solved?
Yeah. Mm.
Things like defining an experiment. I
Mm.
want you to be able to say, like, here's my hypothesis, here's
Yep.
my control, here's my variant. It can be a very simple split test or A/B test,
Yeah.
but I just want you to be able to lay out like what is the thing you're testing for? How are you going to measure? It's fine if you can't really explain like power or stat sig or anything like that. Like computers do that stuff now, and you can watch a YouTube video and learn that also in 20 minutes. Like I'm really
Mm.
not worried about that, but
Yeah.
I need to see like the bones of
Mm.
analytical ability.
Mm. Right. Just to keep it like again for my audience to know, I think of when you were saying, I was thinking of an example. If I were to interview, so one of the things that you tell me what you think of this. But
Mhm.
one of the things that, and again, please be as critical as you can. And you can say, Yudi, you're rejected. I'm okay with that. But one of the things that we worked on was implementing contact center platform. So we are like sales heavy, where people like call in. We have a dialer which calls people because we are selling car loans, right? And a lot of time people also call in, and we get about 100,000 calls. So it's a massive call volume.
Mhm.
Because we have limited salespeople, my hypothesis in this case was that the tool that we were using, it allows us to implement a wait queue. So like, hey, you are in 2 minutes queue, and I mean, you have to wait 2 minutes until we can get you to the agent. Do you want to wait in the line, or do you want us to call you back? So this was something that I wanted to implement in that, because I feel like that would result into less drop off of the customer, because they,
Sure.
before that, they would just be keep listening the music, and they would drop off at some point. They had no clue how much longer they have to wait. And so now they
This
at
is a
least
great
know.
interview question.
Yes.
I already like you're talking about the funnel. You're talking about your users. This is good. This is great. I like where you're going with this.
Yeah. So I implemented this. So this was like, I'm assuming this is an answer I would be giving, that when you would ask like, what is the problem you try to solve, and I was like, okay, this was the problem, that people were dropping off already. So if 100,000 people were calling in, like, are at least 60% are dropping off, because the call volumes were very high from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. That is when people are calling the most. So we implemented this wait strategy, where people would either opt in, or they will decide to wait, because now they know how long they have to wait. And that reduced the wait time from, like, the drop off from 60% to 30%. And that is what I would say, like, is that call like an analytical ability that I have? I'm assuming that is true, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would say like let's say you gave that information to a candidate. That's quite a bit of information. That's generous.
Hmm.
And that might be like the amount of information you give to an associate PM, like an entry level type of PM.
Hmm.
And you've given them basically the entire setup, all the data, everything already. If you're interviewing for like a senior PM, you probably just end with 100,000 people call every morning. What do I do?
Hmm. And
And
the
there's way
problem,
more ambiguity that they need to
right?
think through.
Okay. Yeah. Mm,
And hopefully they start to think about, oh, well, 100,000 people, how many of them are actually talking with your sales force? And
yeah.
you can start to reveal pieces of the puzzle as they ask for it.
So we are expecting people to ask clarifying questions.
I would expect a more experienced PM to be able to dig in and identify all the pieces of the puzzle before they make any sort of recommendation.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. And that is what I've seen difference, where if they would just start solutionizing
Yeah.
as soon as I ask the question. They're like, okay, I would implement this and this. I was like, how would you know to implement that without knowing this information?
Mhm.
And so yeah, okay, got it. Cool. Another question I have on hiring manager round is, the very first question most likely you will be asking, or people will be asking, is, tell me something about yourself. I'm assuming this. Do you ask this question or not?
Um, I mean, I have opinions on unstructured types of questions like that.
Hmm. How do you
Because
start?
usually, geez, how do I start? Um, Usually I just start talking about myself first because
Hmm.
I know the candidate's so nervous. Like
Yeah.
I get it. I've been there. So I will tell them about myself. And then I'll ask them like based on, I'll talk about Indeed and some things that I've worked on. That usually takes like 3 to 5 minutes. And that gives them a chance to like settle down in the interview a little bit. And then I'll kind of ask them similar questions like, oh, where are you working right now?
Hmm.
What are you working on right now? And
Hmm.
then I'll start to organically go into, oh, you mentioned you were working on this. Like, how did that get started? And then we'll go. into all the stuff about that product and just dive deeper and deeper. Because I don't like to look at resumes. I might have mentioned that last time too. I
Yes,
don't
you
want any
do.
bias going into my conversation.
Mm.
I'm trusting that the recruiter, asked the questions that I wanted to ask to make sure that this person is semi-qualified at least. And then I want to go like dive into product in my
Mm.
interview.
Mm. Yeah,
And my interview at the start is just a screen.
yeah.
So I'm still not trying to figure out everything in an hour. But I am biasing my questions toward analytical.
Mm.
I'll ask some other questions about collaboration and leadership and moving fast and solving for ambiguity. But a lot of it will be indexed on data. Like, what information did you get? How did you get it? Who got it for you? How did
Mm.
you use it?
Mm. Mm. Got it. So, assuming again, this is your style, obviously one data point, but assuming many people ask, so tell us a little bit about yourself. At this
Mhm.
point, let's say a candidate has their product portfolio ready and they're like, do you mind if I share my screen because I have something ready to like present? And then
I would be impressed.
you would be.
I would be if it was like relevant.
Yeah, of course, yeah, yeah. So, and assuming most hiring manager will say, "Oh, yeah, sure." I'm assuming that would be the reaction because they're not expecting a presentation, and
Right.
now there's like, here's me, here's what I've like, here's my education. It's a really quick 5 minute slides, but first minute is just to show personality, and then maybe not even first minute, but 30 seconds, and now they go into here are the products that I've worked on. Here is some of the problems that I've solved. Here is an output, and here are the tools I've used, and so and so.
Mhm.
What do you think about this strategy? Like, do you think this will help them steer the direction? Like now, candid is, I feel, is in a lot more control of how they want to tell the story because they have given information to the hiring manager.
Yeah, as long as they're talking about some relevant experience in there,
Yeah.
that's definitely enough for a hiring manager to start poking at and digging
Mhm.
into.
Mm.
And if they have like, there's some questions about, what should I show on my resume or what should I talk to a hiring manager about? It's okay to show some personality.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, humans got to work with each other and they got to like working with each other.
Mm.
So if there's anything fun or interesting that's like a one slide, one sentence kind of thing, that's okay.
Yeah.
It helps you connect as humans and not just as like a transactional relationship that's a hiring manager and a candidate.
Mm. And does it ever impress you if I say I'm from CMU, Columbia, or I'm from California State University? Does it matter?
Nope. Don't
No.
care.
Nice. Okay. Cool. I'm saying that because that's what I've been preaching, but like people don't like to listen until they hear it from more
Yeah.
credible person, I guess.
It's, I mean, in an interview, I never bring it up, any sort of educational background. I never talk about it. And because I don't look at your resume, I don't even know. You
Mm,
might not have even gone to a university.
mm,
But if you are able to speak intelligently about your relevant work experience, like that's what I'm trying to learn about.
yeah.
I'm not trying to learn about your classes.
Mm, mm. Got it. Okay. Um, in this 1 hour, I'm assuming you will have at least 5-10 minutes for the candidates to ask if they have any questions. Should
Mhm.
they say, no, I don't have any questions?
You should probably never say, I don't have any questions. Because I know as a hiring manager, I didn't do a perfect job in this interview. I didn't cover everything you want or need to know,
Mm,
going into the next stage, even. So maybe that's like, if anything, you probably want to know what's going to happen next.
yes.
So that's a
Yeah.
very innocent question to ask. That's understandable.
Mm, mm,
And, there are probably 100 questions you could ask going off of that. That's a very like standard question. Hey, like I really enjoyed our conversation today. Can you help me understand what my next steps are?
yeah. Yeah. And
What are
then
your favorite questions to hear from a candidate? Or
uh,
maybe you have some on your own that you really like to ask.
I like to ask what are some of the current, what is the biggest challenge that you guys are facing right now in the product? So because there is a strategy, the reason I like to ask this is because now I know what problem they're facing, and I will do the homework, all night spending, and send them an email. Hey, you mentioned about this problem and it kept me up all night, and here is a solution that I possibly think that could work. I would be happy to discuss this in my further rounds. So there's a reason I like to ask this question, and I also want to understand like what is the challenges that they are facing. Have I faced those challenges before, or and if I have, then it's much easier for me to like even bring it up that I actually, in my last company, we had the exact same problem and this is how I solved it. So again, I'm not trying to really ask, I'm trying to understand, is there anything that they might be facing that I have and he hasn't asked, like you as a hiring manager haven't asked me. So that is like one question I always ask, like what is the biggest challenge that you guys are facing. Yeah, what is the team structure? I like to understand, because like I think
Mhm.
this is probably more experienced PM, but pods and how do you get resources allocated? Is the resources shared, not shared? Because
Mhm.
and then if it's not shared, how do you manage the capacity? All these, like I really try to understand the team structure, how the work gets done, what is the process, etc. Yeah, those are some questions that I can think of. Oh, what will my first 90-day look like? Also, what are some of the roles? What are some of the challenges you think that I will face in this role? Is also something I'll like ask.
Mm. Yeah, those have different layers depending on like the level of position that you're interviewing for.
Yeah.
But that first question you asked, that is customer centric, that's
Mm.
never going to go out of style.
Yeah.
You can ask that at any level of product you're interviewing for.
Yes.
And the hiring manager will always love that. Hiring
Yeah.
managers love talking about problems.
Yeah. Yeah. What
And
what
the
are
part you
your
mentioned, sorry, go
ha?
ahead, Yudi.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
The follow up you mentioned about, it's not just lip service. You're going to send an email afterward and say, I've been thinking about this problem, really compelling. Maybe you have tackled it in your previous job, or it kept you up at night, like you said, and
Mm,
you bring back relevant thoughts. Like I found out, one, two, three interesting things about this problem. And here would be like what I would do next if I was in charge of solving this problem.
yeah. 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 What else? Is there any other questions you like to hear from the candidates that this always like, it's interesting that they asked me this question?
If they dig more into my products and the problems that my customers are facing, so they might ask me like, what's the biggest problem? And I probably have like one or two that's always top of mind for me,
Mm,
but there's actually 1,000. Like
yeah.
every product manager knows there's way more to do than you could ever possibly do.
Hmm.
I think a really good question would be, what are some problems that you intentionally decided to not solve or prioritize?
Ooh, interesting. Mm,
Because now I'm seeing this person's like, oh, they've been in a similar situation. Like that's a sign of experience where you cannot solve everything and you've
mm,
had to make ruthless prioritization decisions. And they
mm,
want to know how I've done that.
mm, mm. That's interesting. Yeah. Are you expecting a follow up? Like, let's say you say, you first of all, you'll have to think because you haven't thought about that problem in a while. That's why you are not solving that problem. But now that you told them this problem, are you expecting a follow up on that, or is it just more of like, oh, that's an interesting question?
It is a hard question, but now you've made the hiring manager think.
Yeah.
And I promise you, they're not used to thinking
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
interviews. Like, if a company's hiring, then the hiring manager is probably doing 3 to 5 interviews a week.
Mm,
Like, they're just churning through these.
yeah.
But now you've actually made them stop and think about this interaction
Mm,
and how they've
yeah.
been challenged in a good way
Yeah.
in that interview.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, is there like a metric system that you follow, or like, is there a point base that, because again, he or she has to go through the whole process, and collectively there's going to be debrief rounds after every round if the hiring manager is in there, and there's going to be like, okay, what do we think? And then we like, in I will tell you what we do, and like I really like what my boss does is like, it's a more like an elimination. Do we All we are deciding is, do we think that is it worth spending another hour with this person in the next for the next round? That's all.
Yeah.
Like, we are not trying to make a decision if we want to hire or not. And if the answer is unanimously yes, or majority of people think yes or no, then we try to understand why not. And then they are moved on, and then the final part is where we like, okay, we have three people who we interviewed for the final thing. Who do we want to pick and why? That is when like the most conversation happens. But what is your process?
So the recruiter screen, hiring manager screen are binary, just like you mentioned.
Mm,
It's really just like, should they go on to the next stage or not?
mm,
The typical next step for mid to senior level PMs is the panel interview. And there are 4 to 6 senior director level product managers in that panel. Usually
mm,
like the variety of levels to get a good, like, different perspectives. There is something closer to a rubric for that interview, just to make sure that everybody is thinking about this candidate in the same way
yes, yeah.
and not like wildly different evaluations.
Mm, mm,
After that, it's another like thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thing. But the evaluation is consistent. So at least you'll know like why this person gave a thumbs up or why this person gave a thumbs down. It should be within the realm of that rubric.
mm,
The final round is a bunch of back-to-back one-on-one interviews. It used to be pre-COVID days, a full day on site in the office, like
yeah.
1 hour, 3 hours in the morning. So you have 3 interviews in the morning, then you have an hour lunch, and you have 4 more hours in the afternoon. It's a brutal day.
Yeah.
It's so hard as a candidate, but
Yeah.
I mean, you have 6 to 8 interviews with different product people, and each of them will ask their own interview questions, and it's binary for each of them.
Mm,
And then they give their recommendations to the hiring manager. Ultimately, it's up to the hiring manager
mm,
because this person will report to the hiring manager. So if the hiring manager wants to, take a risk, it's up to them. They're going to be coaching this person.
yeah.
Like, do they want to make that investment, or do they want to feel like they're making a safer bet
Yep.
and
Yeah.
really strive for somebody they have high confidence in that can hit the ground running?
Mm,
There's autonomy at Indeed for that. Like, if
mm,
the hiring manager wants somebody more junior and they're willing to do that, okay. Or if they feel like they got to be really strict, they have barely any bandwidth themselves, they need somebody to plug and play.
mm,
That's their discretion.
mm. I have two candidates in front of you. One is a superstar PM. Like, you would hire them in a heartbeat because they will solve the problem for you, but they are not coachable and they're jerk. What the one?
That's already a hard no.
Okay. Yeah.
Here's why. Like, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
So, Indeed, at least, is a massive company.
Mm,
Um, Nothing gets done by one person going and doing everything. It's
mm,
impossible.
mm,
It's heavily collaborative
mm,
by necessity.
mm,
So if you hire a jerk, even if they're like a brilliant strategic and analytical mind, they're not going to get anything done.
mm.
They're not actually going to have any customer impact because nobody wants to work with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
if
so,
the other person is, very coachable, super flexible, willing to listen, is a sponge for everything that you're teaching them, but doesn't have all the skills, I'll take that person. They'll probably be down leveled because they aren't, senior level if
yeah.
they don't have all the skills. And that's fine, as
Yeah.
long as expectations are fully set.
Mm,
But if that person has the foundation of, I've seen those analytical bones, I can see in all the interactions they've had, like every interviewer said they were really easy to talk to. Even if they didn't have the answer, they would say, I don't know, like, help me understand like what the next step is here.
Mm.
That's coachable. You
Yeah.
can improve on that.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed, 100%. And I want to also hone in on to this I don't know, because I feel a lot of time students make this mistake. They feel they have to know everything that they have been asked. So they come up with an answer, and then at this point of time they are rambling versus just saying,
Yeah.
I have never solved this problem, or that has not happened with me." How okay is that?
It's even better if you answer a question with a question.
Mm,
Like, if you don't know, it's okay if you don't know, but what information do you need to start knowing?
mm,
Then I can see that like you are thinking about this, you understand how to handle not knowing because you know what questions you need to ask to be able to provide a response.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Love that. Okay. And I know you mentioned some rubric, and every org was going to have that. What are the typical skills that you are judging PMs based on? Like whether it is junior PM, new PM, senior PM, like
Mhm.
there must be like, obviously, analytical is going to be one of them, but what
Mhm.
are other things that this is, I'm asking this question, keeping the goal in mind that these are the skills they should be building while they are in their college or like preparing for the interviews.
Generally, four overall is what I look for: analytical, of course, collaboration,
Mm.
leadership, and fast. So, by
Leadership,
leadership, sorry,
you said leadership and
fast. So,
fast.
ability to
Mm.
move fast, make fast decisions, make other people faster.
Mm. Mm.
Collaboration is influence and ability to be influenced.
Mm.
You can't just always be trying to get other people to do everything you want.
Yeah.
There's a time to be a leader and there's a time to be led.
Yep.
And on the leadership side, your ability to have a vision and a strategy.
Mm.
And have you ever been, the actual leader of a team before?
Mm.
How did that go for you?
Can
And
the
what,
can that leadership be for the students who haven't had experience in the corporate world, but they have led events where they had a budget of $10,000 to organize this big event? Uh,
Mhm.
is that comparable?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Like, for example, at the Purdue Product Conference, we got to meet some of the leaders
Yep.
who put that together, and we saw the outcome.
Hmm.
We lived through those, I guess, one whole day of
Yep.
the product conference. We saw how it went, saw how it was organized. So I would say, like, that's a story you should talk about if you were one of those product leaders at Purdue who put that event on.
Yes. And can I also say, would that also be considered a resume item?
Yeah, I would put it on there, but I would also be prepared to talk about success. So one of my questions would be, how did you know that conference was successful? Like,
Mm.
as the person who put it together and organized it, you spent thousands of dollars, perhaps, on putting this together. You got a bunch of people to come. How do you know if it was good or not?
Mm. Got it. Okay.
Maybe this is one data point that
Yeah.
two of the speakers got together after the event and kept the
Right.
relationship
Yes.
going.
Yeah. Yeah. Networking. And I'm assuming they probably have a hypothesis and then the surveys. Hopefully, they did some surveys. I'm not sure, but I'm
Yeah.
assuming, knowing the person, probably did something. Yeah. So they did surveys, and here is the outcome. 4 out of 5 people love the sessions, and so and so. Here is some things that I learned as a feedback. So that to me is like a solid, like, okay, this is iterative process. They learned, this was the first time they did something so big, and it was, I would call it successful, but yeah, etc. So great. Okay. sorry, I derailed you. So collaboration, leadership, which is influencing over or getting influenced, which is, it could be in your team, leading a team in workplace or campus opportunities as well. And then fast, like how do you judge fast?
So in my interviews that I'll do, we'll walk through a case study together,
Mm,
and I'll talk you through, probably some part of Indeed.com, because I
mm,
can show you the website and we can look at the website, and there's a million things you can do on Indeed. But I'll focus on like one or two for the purposes of the interview conversation. And basically want this person to come up with an experiment within the hour that we're talking.
mm,
And I'm judging how good are they at creating the simplest possible experiment that's going to validate or invalidate their hypothesis.
nice.
And it should be hopefully something that is perceived at least as extremely simple, even if in reality I know that this is going to take like a team a month to do.
Mm,
If it looks on the surface to them that this is extremely simple
mm,
and it's going to teach them whether they were right or not regarding this hypothesis, that's great.
mm.
But if they're talking about like adding a bunch of new pages or like creating a completely new feature that does a bunch of things, like that's really complicated.
Yeah, that's a poor product manager's shiny syndrome.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to wrap this session, and hopefully I can bring you back. But finally, how do you prepare for product interviews? Like, what does your like? Obviously, you are on the other side. Assuming at some point you might be looking, you are looking at a very senior level. But when you were looking for Indeed, what kind of preparation did you do? And now with all the research tools that are available, like how do you prepare for these roles?
I can tell a short story about how I got my first product job. And
Yes,
that's probably relevant to the students wanting to get their first product job.
yes.
I met the hiring manager in a coffee shop, and
Coffee shop. Okay.
he likes his style was like informal, comfortable, public place. And it was a break for him too, get out of the office.
Yeah.
Um, I printed off a bunch of pages of the website and basically told him like 100 things that were wrong with the website. But it didn't start that way. I was like, I see this, and this is over 10 years ago at
Yeah.
this point. So I had all these pages printed out, and I like circle all these things on the website of like, what is the goal of this? I don't understand like why this is on this page, because it seems like the page is trying to do this thing, but this element over here is completely different.
Mm,
Um, and just like kind of that kind of thing on several different of their templates that they had on the website. And I guess that resonated with him. He mentioned later on that he liked that I had come to the table, wanting to talk about all the things that I perceived as problems with the website.
mm.
And there was one in particular where he said, "You sound just like the conversation I had with my CEO yesterday." Apparently, there's like one particular item that the CEO was like, "What the hell is this?"
Yes. Got it.
That's probably not standard, but like problem focused. Being super problem focused and just questioning why,
Mm,
why,
mm,
and that'll always lead you down an interesting path.
mm. And the goal of that meeting wasn't that.
I don't know what was on his agenda, but I showed up with a folder full of printouts,
Yep.
and a bunch of things I wanted to talk about.
Okay. Love it. Any last tips before we wrap for aspiring for this is for interviewing or getting an interview call?
As a job seeker, shoot your shot. Keep trying. It's going to happen, I promise you.
Yes.
I think maybe next time we talk about some real practical next steps, because
Mm,
maybe we can talk about this too. Is product management an entry level job? Like, should
mm.
that be somebody's first job out of university?
Love that. Yes.
People have
Awesome.
differing opinions about that.
Yes, I love it. Cool. Awesome. Thank you, John. I'll let you go and then we'll talk soon.